Hey everyone, hope you're doing okay. So, welcome to the Unforeseen Journey podcast. This week, I've called the episode Making Friends with Your Own Worst Enemy. And this is really continuing on a discussion I had with my clients last night on our kind of bi weekly group coaching call. And this is something I've really implemented recently because it's really come to my kind of noticing is that there are themes with everyone I coach, even though actually everyone I coach has very different goals and outcomes and things they want to achieve through coaching, but they share similar roadblocks, especially in terms of internally. So, i.e., the relationship with self. So, I found it really beneficial to um, include these group coaching calls because I think it also creates better community. It creates relatability to what's going on. So, I want to talk about that today. But before I get into it, I've felt this kind of obligation to share with you, as someone who's taken the time to listen to this, why my social media stuff's kind of changed a lot recently and what that feels like, and to share it with you in some kind of way to provide context and hopefully in this maybe encourage a few of you to consider doing the same. But it's bold. It's not bold. It's not like some grand gesture, but it certainly is a bit different. So what have I done? So quite simply, I think as a coach or as a guy just navigating life, one of my pain points in the last several years is moving towards a place of living a life that I would say is completely without conscious awareness of having to try to be other than what I am. So I've spoken about performing different roles, fitting in like a bit of a chameleon. And I've spoken quite extensively about how that's been something in my life. And as I've gone from owning a gym, being a business owner, to being a coach just online, one of the main things I've struggled with and felt resistance with is social media and how you should show up on there as a coach, because it just didn't feel right and it was really draining. And the reason it was draining was because of this, really, because you're kind of told to view social media as like this, the website you're shop from. And in that way, you're supposed to present ideas, methods, solutions in quite a polished way. You have your named system of coaching, etc., 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 and it's just not true insofar as it represents the process which is going on behind closed doors. And it's been a thing for me to kind of show up on there and present this kind of like polished idea when I'm going through a process, I'm going through a journey, and I'm still figuring that out. So it feels way more authentic for me to now just show up on there and do that, and to present the process, to present thinking, to present ideas in such a way that are unfinished. And even though I may be compromising the supposed demonstration of my own utility or worth as a coach, I believe there's something really significant in pushing back against that idea and just being a bit more me. Because for one, it feels way less like full of friction. I don't feel like I have to worry about what I'm going to say on there, because instinctively I'm saying what I would say if I were to meet you. And even now, as I do this podcast, I'm doing more of that and sounding more like me, I believe anyway, if there's such a thing. And so it's a lot less of an energy drain, because I was trying to show up on there and project in this way that I think, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. But the trouble was, it just felt inauthentic and it wasn't really getting me anywhere and attracting new clients. And so I've tried something different. And I've got aligned with this guy called Ryan Orico in the US, that I spoke about last week or the week before. And yeah, it's weird. On this journey I'm on, I've had people come into my life at varying points that have kind of solved a point of friction for me in the last couple of years. And without getting all wooey, I'm a great believer in that kind of being some relevance and some significance. So he's kind of really opened my eyes to a way of thinking out loud on there, or learning out loud, which is what I would describe the process I'm going through. So You probably see I did a lot of ask me anythings and a lot of like interaction based stuff on there. Whereas before I was standing behind this kind of like a wall of like projection. So I'd project out onto social media, you know, beautiful posts, whatever it is, will be beautiful as far as my design skills were capable. And and now I'm trying to create less of a barrier between me and the people who engage with me on there, which feels really nice. And this is probably the point of it, is that ironically we have access to a system and way to communicate and feel ever more connected to the world around us. But somehow through the way we use those platforms, we have somehow created less connection and more isolation. And so instead of me continuing to just push back against that, which is what I've done in the past and go, social media is bullshit, I'm starting to view it as a tool, and the application and the use of that tool can be entirely defined by those who use it. And so I'm kind of pushing to this place of going, well, I'm going to use this as a tool to share ideas and thoughts in a way that creates conversation and creates connection. And if the outcome of some of those connections happen to result in a professional coaching relationship, that's great. But I'm free of attachment from that at the moment, which means that it's just a lot easier to speak on there because I'm not trying to sell you. It's just like, hey, what's going on for you? But actually, bizarrely, through doing that, I've become more acutely aware of what people need help with. And so that's beautifully reflecting and changing my own direction and creating some clarity for me as a coach as well. So yeah, I want to share that with you. And I guess what I would say to you before I dig into the subject today is, like, if you are experiencing that friction on there and you feel like you've always got to put like your best foot forward, etc., then maybe consider doing that. Maybe consider just being you, and like, fuck anyone who criticizes you, because they're not you. And if we collectively change the way we use the platform, I think it can become something quite beautiful. Whereas at the moment, it is something pretty toxic, which creates in many people a feeling of inadequacy. And yeah, it's ironic because it's a platform that I think is so beautifully designed to bring us together. If we use it in a way that we're, we're unafraid of being us. And if there's anything in coaching I would want to help someone achieve, it's to be unafraid of being them. Because it's noticing for me over the years that many people will engage in the coaching process because, well, either they don't know who they are and they want to find that, or the kind of toxic end of that spectrum is they know who they are and they want to get away from that because they haven't ever developed a good relationship with themselves. So they somehow feel like fixing these things is going to fix them. I hope that makes sense. I share that with you for what it's worth today. And so lastly on this, I just would say, like, if you follow me on social media, please, 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 for the sake of having a good time on there and for not just scrolling through shit, try and engage with me if I'm saying something that means something to you, or I'm asking a question. Ask a question. It really is so nice to be on the receiving end of those questions, to know that I'm in some way providing some kind of service to people there, and not just talking shit all the time.
So here we go now. I'm going to get into talking about this concept of making friends with your own worst enemy. And for many of us, I believe that our own worst enemy is ourselves. And I'm sure this isn't a concept that is new to you. And if you're listening to this, it's certainly something that will be familiar to you into conversations I've had about my own experiences. And I don't want to preach to the converted or teach you to suck eggs, but that's really what I'm talking about here. And reflecting back on this, talking about this now, if I look back on my own life and know that many of the decisions I've made that have been poor decisions have been directly related back to this lesser part of me, let's call it that. And so as I want to speak about this today, I'm going to say the same thing as what I said to my clients last night, is that this isn't about trying to answer it for you. It's about developing an awareness. And from that place, you can develop the process of creating inquiry and questioning around these things. And then from that place, eventually, I think we can arrive at a point where we feel a lot more in balance, if that's even such a thing. But I think it's always good to say that this thing we're going to talk about today, this, the enemy within, is something that will be there with us until the day we die, and you're going to be working on this if you pursue this until the day you die. And it's about just a small increment of change long term, which I believe adds up to a significant amount of improvement over the course of your lifetime, which is why it's a worthy pursuit. And the time and energy invested in this, the mental thought, is well worth it. So I'm going to share with you some thoughts, concepts, and ideas from various sources, various books I've read over the years, and to try and pull them together into a way today that really kind of makes sense for you. The main book I'm going to reference and talk about is a book called Coming Alive by Phil Stutz. So I've mentioned him before in some of the other episodes. It's called The Tools. This is another one of his books. So I'm going to make reference to that today, but also parts of this talk can be derived from a book called The Power of Now, To the Soul, the Chimp Paradox, and there's probably some others that are like peppered in there because at a certain point you read and assimilate information, and sometimes you forget where that original idea comes from, and it somehow molds into being your own, but not really your own, which I guess is creative thought in some way, right? So the goal with all of this is to create awareness around the side of us that is not ideal, is negative, and from that place of awareness, we can then learn to create a circuit breaker or a separation between that worst side of us taking over or not. And that's really the goal in this and the power in it, okay? And it's really important to say is that as we go through this process, again, like this is part of us that will be with us until the day we die. It's perfectly natural. We all have this in us and it's never going to go away. And so I don't want you to get attached to feeling bad about the fact this exists within you, because it exists within all of us. I think the truth is most successful people just really understand how to leverage this negative side of themselves and silence it when it should be silenced. So yeah, really important to say, don't beat yourself up for having this. We've all got it. And there's some power in this part of us. It's extremely powerful. Negativity, I'm not sure why. I can't put my finger on this, but negative energy is like an addictive energy. If you look at the news, if you look at social media, the stories that sell are always the worst, most tragic stories. And I think this is the way, same in terms of thought patterns. And when you have developed and been consumed by like a negative pattern of thoughts, how hard is it to break that chain? Whereas when you have positive thoughts, it feels like the most fragile little chain starts to build in your head, and anything can come along to break that. But there is so much power in negative thoughts. They compound and accelerate incredibly. So I think the key is to not beat yourself up, not get attached to the fact that you're good or bad for having these thoughts, because we will have them. And then from that place of noticing these thoughts, we're in a place to gain a bit of control. And yeah, as I said, you're never going to notice everything, but the key is to start noticing something. And we're going to give you some ideas today on how you can do that. So if we're going to name this thing, why are we naming it? What are we going to name it? So for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to call it Part X. It's been referred to as the monkey mind, the chimp, even the ego, you could argue, is the same thing. But they all represent the lowest order, worst part of ourselves. And I'm going to discuss what I think that means in a minute. But the reason we name it is that if you name something, it's easy to identify it. And as I say this, I need to be honest with you and say we're naming something and oversimplifying something that is highly complex. An analogy that was someone told me years ago is if you think of your brain, we like to think of it as this singular voice that exists in harmony, whereas it really is like a committee, specifically like a council committee where everyone is just at each other's throats, and we hold opposing views and opposing thoughts at any one time. We have different emotions, different drivers, and I believe truly that finding joy in life comes from accepting those conflicting ideas, thoughts, and emotions, and working through actually what matters with you, and honoring truly who you are, which sounds really cliched, but I think it's resisting against some of those thoughts and not honoring them, and not being able to think in a way that creates intention that is the problem. If you're just consumed by these different kind of concepts of ideas and you're just going through life mindlessly, that's a real problem. So I think that's really the goal. And so today we're going to call it Part X, and Part X is going to be a part of you forever. So it's always going to be there. And if we think of this as being the most negative part of you, the exact opposite of this would be something like your heart, your soul, or your spirit. Whatever language works for you, you can be as spiritual as you want with it. I certainly have no issues with that and find myself being more and more spiritual as I move on through life, which is really strange because I've always been very anti spirituality in the first part of my life, and I'm still unpicking why that is. There's no significant reason, but I definitely, I'm definitely moving towards that place, which is like a really nice place to be. So it's a permanent part of you, and the flip side of this negative part of you is going to be your spirit, your soul, like the highest order, most virtuous part of you, the all-knowing, pure part of you. And through us naming it and naming the opposites, hopefully you can begin to label it, see it, and then from that place we can learn to take action. So what does Part X do? What does it want? And why is it there? Why is it there is a discussion that we could spend hours on. But to move past the why, we just simply should, I think, acknowledge that it does exist. And you know, the why is something I've pondered for a while. Like, why do us all of us have this like self-destruct part of us, the part that keeps us away from pursuing our dreams and our ambitions and our desires and our goals, and makes us do dumb, crazy shit. And we could say it's a part of social conditioning. You could say it's a part of the society within which we live. Or the other thing I've considered is that Part X is generally a construct of the outer world and not the inner world, in that the fears and anxieties and the worries they create are all to do with things in the past and in the future, which we'll talk about. But were we to have no concepts of time in such a way, and we were just existing in the moment, then surely this part of us couldn't exist. I don't know. We can talk about that at length, but it exists, and it exists in all of us. And what it's going to do, if you let it, is it's going to keep you in your comfort zone. It's going to create an active dialogue in your head that is going to keep you away from pushing through discomfort. It's going to tell you you can't do something. It's going to catastrophize every potential possible outcome in the future in such a way as you're afraid to live in any kind of true way in the moment. And it really is just the thing that just fucks shit up for us. That's all it is. It's the thing that's just there, and when you lean into it and you are guided and led by it, I think we've all experienced that, and you come out of the side of it and go, oh, why did I do that? Why did I do that? So it's in all of us. It's extremely powerful and it's extremely negative. And it's, you could argue that its main goal is to keep you in like a certain small existence. So it's protecting you from potential harm and risk. And that would be the analogy of maybe the chimp mind or the monkey mind, because it's overly paranoid, it's overly defensive, and it's just trying to keep you safe. But I don't really subscribe to that view specifically. I feel like it's more of an active like enemy. I don't feel like it's a passive defender of your own self, which the monkey implies, it implies that it's just got a goal that it's just trying to look after you. But I feel like this is something more than that for many of us, and especially for me. I feel like it's almost like an active saboteur in my brain that is trying to ruin my ability to be who I want to be in this world, which is incredible to think of. But having labeled it and noticed it and acknowledged it as that, it helps me sit with it, which is powerful. What this part of us will always do, and I kind of spoke about it a minute ago, is it will always leverage the past and the future to support its own narrative about what you should and shouldn't do. So if you look at the past, it will use every negative experience to help you take no action. It will ruin the relationship with self because it will demonstrate to you all the times in the past you failed at something. And it will selectively forget all the times in the past when you've succeeded at something. But ironically, in other ways, it will make you look back on certain events that were negative and give you kind of that rose tinted spectacle view. So in truth, it's just very manipulative of the past. And I think this is really important to address because when we think of memory, we kind of think of it like a photo, but it isn't a photo. It's an artist's impression. And if the artist is this kind of fucked up narcissistic side of you who doesn't want you to do anything in life, it's going to be painted in such a way as to give you the the interpretation that suits its own narrative at that time. It's not a photo, it's not an image. So if you're clinging to your memories and you're basing your decisions now on the memories of the past, just understand that those memories are not real, and they're an interpretation of a moment that has long since passed. And it's really easy, I think, for us to start telling ourselves stories about the past that at some point then become the truth insofar as we see it. But if you were to go back to that moment, it would be entirely different, which is really crazy when you think of it. And so the flip side of the past is the future. And so we look into the future, there's all these potential outcomes. And I think it's impossible in life not to want or move towards a place where you want to achieve certain things in life. And I certainly don't want to be the coach that tells you, no, just remove any kind of ideas of pursuing goals, just go and live in the fucking woods, etc., because I think that that removes any hunger to grow and to achieve and to have ambition and to want to make a contribution in this lifetime. I think we should have some hunger, but I think there's a key towards where that comes from. And that hunger should come from, I believe, a place of contribution and seeking joy, and not as a pursuit or a way to make up for us feeling less than, which has maybe gone down a rabbit hole. But if we look at the future in part X, the thing that it really does is it will catastrophize everything out into the future. And it will create anxiety and fear and worry, and it will do it in such a way to push you towards inaction or making really poor decisions. And I say this, being completely open about having experienced this myself at numerous points in the past. When I reflect back on owning the gym and the last couple of years owning the gym, I saw the writing on the wall with the way the business was going. But I was so afraid to take decisive action about what I knew in my heart I wanted to do, which was to step away from it, because I'd catastrophized every potential outcome that would happen if I did walk away from it. And this part of me really leveraged my ego in that moment, and it said, you can't do that, people will see you as a failure. You can't do that, you've invested so much time and energy in this. You can't do that, what are you going to go and do? And it took me a while to work through those things and to genuinely investigate those potential outcomes. But when I had done, I arrived at a place where I realized that the worst potential outcome, insofar as I could see at the time, which is the one that happened, and I liquidated the company, my relationship broke down, I was like starting again. It actually wasn't that bad. And when I imagined it at the time, logically, it felt like a weight lifted. And that is exactly how I feel right now. And if I could describe my life in one way at the moment, I'd say it'd feel light. And that's great. I mean, certainly I'm still going through the process, still going through the journey, which is what I'm sharing more and more of now. And I'm not in a place where I feel like I'm kind of fully through the other side of it, in that I've fully realized how I can impact more people in the way that is meaningful to me. I'm certainly not in a position financially yet where I want to be. And that isn't like I want a yacht or anything in life. I just want to be able to be self sufficient, not have to look for other sources of income other than that through coaching or being on here or whatever, and to be able to be independent, to move back to my own place, and to be in a position to be financially secure. And I'm not there yet, and I want to share that with you. But if I remove any feeling of disappointment I sense in the moment now as I say that to you, I would not trade it for where I was before. And that's significant. I'd rather be at this point beginning again, if that's what I am doing, than back where I was. So part X, it exists in the past and in the future, and that's what it uses to leverage its argument. And this is why I think labeling it is the first part of the process towards overcoming it. How do we do this? So, quite simply, I would just encourage you to start actively noticing when this thing comes up. And you'll always know it when it happens because you can feel it in your gut, which I'll talk about in a bit. But I think you'll always know it when it happens because it's like, oh, I'm there. But the trouble is, it's creating the awareness to have that kind of pattern interrupt in that moment before it then consumes you into taking over like some kind of weird bug or parasite. It kind of consumes us, and then we come out the other side of it and go, oh shit, why did I do that? And it happens again and again and again. So that's why I think labeling and noticing is the first way to start with it. And when you do notice it, it would be of benefit, I believe, to ask questions around that noticing and go, well, is this thing I'm thinking now true? Do I know it to be true? How does this make me feel? And, if I could just get rid of this thought, would I feel a lot better? That's actually from another book I just read a little while ago. Those specific questions, they really resonated with me about this particular subject, because I think part X is it's just like a lie machine. It's not telling you the truth. It's telling you an interpretation of the truth insofar as to, I don't know, make you not do what you probably should be doing. And that's the thing. That's the thing. I think that's why it's so big for me to talk about. Is that I feel like whenever this comes up, it's taking you away from what you should be doing, and that is pursuing what matters most to you. And that's why I think it's so destructive. And I'm recognizing that, learning out loud in this moment. It always takes you away from that highest order version of you. So I think that's why we want to start here. And to quote a phrase from the book, Coming Alive, which I spoke to my clients about last night, I want to read this to you now. And hopefully this will make some sense. It's pretty simple. So, everything you do either expands the sense of what is possible or adds to that feeling that nothing is possible. Everything you do either expands the sense of that which is possible or adds to that feeling that nothing is possible. And so, from this place, talking about this destructive force within us, we've got to kind of say, well, it's making you think nothing is possible, and that's not good. So we need to learn to kind of overcome that, and that's what I want to talk about. Yeah. So now I want to talk about briefly the ways in which this part X attacks you. Again, this is from the book I was referencing previously called Coming Alive, and I hope through me discussing this, there is some benefit to you in terms of recognizing your own behaviors and how part X kind of takes over for you. So firstly, self-gratification, right? particularly, activities which are numbing, which take you away from actually what you want to achieve, but in the moment feel very good. So, drink, drugs, pornography, junk food, whatever it is, right? Feel great in the moment, but kind of fuck your stuff up long term. And for many of us, they take you further and further away actually from what you want to achieve. So that's the first way it attacks you. It convinces you into giving you permission to indulge in those behaviors because somehow you've earned it or deserved it. Secondly, it attacks you through lethargy, which is basically inaction, not being bothered, losing the desire, the motivation, etc., etc. It attacks you in that way, and it creates the self talk that stops you from progressing. Thirdly, demoralization. So, what does this mean? This means basically it will use the past or the not happened future to tell you why you're unable to achieve something and that you will just fail if you try. And so, from that place of demoralization, you therefore do not take action. And lastly, it's going to utilize hurt feelings. What does this mean? It means stuff that's happened to you in the past that you haven't let go of. You're still holding on to it. Trauma, relationships, whatever it is. And I'm not making light of these things, but I'm saying a certain point through the journey you go through, this part of you will really leverage that to prevent you from moving forward in life. And again, I am not saying if you've been through trauma, you've just got to get over it and move on. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't want to make light of that. But I think there's an important conversation to be had about managing that trauma and dealing with it in such a way that it doesn't affect you moving forward in life beyond a certain point, which I know is going to be incredibly tough if you've been through a lot of things in your life. So yeah, that's the way it attacks you. There's four ways: self-gratification, lethargy, demoralization, hurt feelings, not letting go. So as I talk about these four ways it will attack you, I think it's important to say that it won't just be one of these. It will probably be two or even all of them. And reflecting back on my own part X, I call it that, it definitely attacks me in each of those different ways through different magnitudes. Definitely self-gratification for me, being someone who's very addictive in nature, recovering addict in many ways. It's the main one. Lethargy is another one, in that sometimes I do feel unable to take action, but I've got to be honest, that's less so for me, especially these days. Demoralization is a massive one. I've managed to selectively forget every other thing I've succeeded at in my life, which I'm honest has been every other career pursuit, personal pursuit I've had has been a success. The one failure I've had is the business in the last few years, but that's consumed me to the point of creating some serious self-doubt, which I'm working through now and bringing out into the open here. And the hurt feelings part, not so much really for me. There are certain things which I don't really want to speak of on here, which have consumed me for some time, but I definitely feel in a place where those things don't create any kind of cloud over the decisions I make in day to day, or the lack of higher order decisions and thinking. So as we begin to as we begin to kind of continue the discussion on this of what it is, the part X, then I guess the next side of this is like, how do we deal with that? And I've alluded to some of it already, but I wanted to kind of give you a few different ways to approach it now. And then maybe in further conversations, if it's something of interest, I can continue to talk about it more. But hopefully through this, there might be a way in for you to start gaining some leverage over it. So the first thing you can do as a starting point is start noticing and labeling it when it comes up, right? These moments are clear if we are aware of them. If we're unaware of them, before we know it, we're sucked into being consumed by it. And the only point we do notice it is when we come out of that mode of being consumed by part X and we're thinking clearly and going, shit, what did I do? So the first part is to start noticing and labeling it. something I've started doing recently, and if you spent any time with me recently in the last few weeks, at certain points in the day, my phone will go off. And this is from a book called How to Meet Yourself by Nicole LaPera. And it's something she says to do, but it's a consciousness check-in, which I love the idea of, because it's creating deliberate points in the day where you're kind of have a pattern interrupt, and you go, right, what are you doing right now? Where's your mind? Is it in a positive, constructive place, or are you consumed by something less than optimal? That's been something that's really beneficial. So I have 3 of them throughout the day, and I just make notes, whatever comes up, wherever I'm at that time. And I do that in such a way that I'm not attaching any negativity to this. It is what it is. And I think that's important, is that this is about breaking free of the attachment of good and bad and just noticing. Because if we attach the label of bad to the fact we get consumed by this, that is further accelerating and compounding the power of this part of us. We've got to do it in such a way of go, oh, there it is. But there's no more than that. There's no emotion to that. It's almost like a little, oh, I see you, I acknowledge you, and there it is, and then we move on. And this is why I think the last thing to talk about here is the key to the kingdom in this, and the thing for me especially, and that is meditation. And for me, meditation has enabled me to create some awareness between the thoughts which have taken over my mind previously in the past. And I think, unfortunately, the disconnect on meditation is that for many of us, we're sold it as this spiritual thing, this spiritual tool, which it certainly has origins in, but as a practical application for most of us living a life where we're overwhelmed by thoughts, we're unable to create space from thoughts in such a place as to create intention and take action, then meditation gives us a really beautiful, succinct, easy to adopt tool in how to do that. And as we do it, the other thing to consider is that this is not about having a quiet mind. My mind is racing. It is non-stop. I don't know if that's the same for you, but it is for me. I have thoughts in there all the time. And sharing with you now, part of the whole social media thing for me is I feel like I'm offloading a lot of those thoughts, and it's quite therapeutic in a way, because it's like there's a lot of stuff going around in here, and if I get that out, it somehow feels offloaded. And I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but for me, it works. So meditation isn't about quieting your mind. It's about noticing that which arises in your mind and then beginning again. So with a lot of meditation, you do something like Headspace, which is one of the apps. It teaches you to focus on your breath. You start focusing your breath, start counting your breaths, and then what am I going to have for dinner? Okay, I was thinking about you don't enter into the thought. You notice the thought. You begin again. Maybe 2 breaths later, another thought. 3 breaths later, another thought. And it's not about having less thoughts, it's about noticing the thoughts. And from that place of noticing comes a tremendous amount of power, because you realize that you are not your thoughts. And this maybe for me is the last thing to speak on here with you today in this episode, is the power of recognizing that you aren't your thoughts and you aren't part X. And if I could describe it to you in this moment, as I'll try to in this platform if you're listening, and I can hope it can make sense to you. And I'm going to try and slow down with this and explain it to you in such a way as I hope connects with something inside of you. Or if it doesn't, you can disregard it and tell me a lot of shit. So it feels to me, at least, that there is a place within me that exists that is kind of timeless. Like a part of the voice of me has been the same me since I was an infant. And that hasn't aged, it hasn't changed. It feels like the same voice, the same part of me. And if I were to close my eyes and think about where that voice exists, I would say it would not even exist within my body. It would exist kind of back from my body. It's almost like I'm third person view of who I am in a computer game. That's where I feel like the the centered awareness, if you want to call it, the truest form of consciousness or self or soul exists. And that pure place is one that is really quite beautiful. But the problem is that part is like a little whisper, And through most of our lives, we're overcome with a voice that exists, I would say, within our brains. And that seems to be like a shout. And it seems to be, just so concerned with stuff that we're really unable to silence it and notice ourselves sitting back from it. And so when I say our mind and the thoughts which occur in our mind, I really feel like if we talk about part X, that's also within there too. And there are other more positive parts, like the adult rational part, etc., etc. But the part X and the mind, they all live in there. And within that is the ability to create, generate, and use emotions. And unfortunately, because we have this really loud, dominant voice inside our minds that controls our emotions, that also influences how we feel. And again, this sounds really convoluted, but it's the way I think of it now, is that emotion is like a thing in the moment, but how you feel is like an overall theme of how you're feeling in yourself day to day in life. And here's why I think meditation's great, because meditation isn't about numbing yourself from emotion or thought. It's about understanding it, creating some awareness of it. And from that place of awareness, you can leverage it and understand whether you want to utilize that emotion or you want to disregard it. This isn't about numbing you to life and emotion and not experiencing anger and passion and sadness and all those things, which are beautiful, powerful things to experience in appropriate forms. But too often, I believe those emotions are compounded and cascade into really negative ways of thinking that really affect how we feel. And so, what I want to leave you with today is this is why I want you to start meditating. This is why I want you to start creating some space to start just noticing, just breathing and noticing. And if breathing doesn't work for you, you can do kind of mantra meditation, which is where you just, recycle a short mantra over and over in your head, maybe a positive affirmation, whatever it is, but do something which quietens the noise, which is developing the ability to think about how you think. Because if you don't, you're going to live your life consumed by this on a roller coaster of emotion. And you're going to have moments where maybe everything feels good, but for most of it, you're going to feel out of control. And that isn't good for anyone. So, yeah, I hope that makes sense. I really do. And it would be my deepest desire to help you feel a little bit more in control of who you are, how you think, and the emotions that are flying around in your head. And then circling back to the start of this part X side of us, that's why meditation is important, because from this place of awareness, you can start noticing part X, start challenging it, and then every once in a while, you're going to make a decision to act against what that says. And I believe if we start doing that, there's an incredible change that can happen in all of us where we actually realize our truest, most fullest potential. That I think none of us are tapping into it. We're probably operating about 20% of what we're capable of because we're so afraid of being ourselves because of this part of us. And I guess to leave you with a thought today, just consider if you didn't have any of these negative thoughts and these negative emotions, the things telling you that you weren't capable of doing something. Imagine what your life would be like, about where you could potentially be and what you could be achieving right now. So this is why it's something that's worth pursuing. And whether you're listening to this to improve your physical fitness, your emotional fitness, your career, your relationships, this is foundational. This is the thing. If you start noticing this, taking action against it, everything else is going to fall into place in such a way that it feels without effort. So, yeah, cool. This show has probably been edited together because I've had some technical difficulties through it. So if it feels a bit fractured, that's because I've had to stop and start recording about 4 times. So it's been a bit annoying today. But hopefully some of what I've said makes sense to you. If you've got any feedback, please let me know. And if you would like to jump on the podcast with me and be a guest on here so we can have a chat about whatever you want to chat about. It doesn't have to be a coaching session. We can just chat through some of the things you're thinking about what I'm saying. then let me know. I want to get more people on here, and not like, well-known people. We don't all have to be like Pat, who's like a psychologist of 40 years, but I just want to have more conversations. And fuck, like, I think people need to hear more conversations with normal people to help them feel a bit more connected and a little bit less isolated. So yeah, cool. Have a good one. See you soon.